Okay, it is 10 o'clock, but I'm going to wait just another minute here. I expected we would have Brandon with us.
Commissioner Scar, is Commissioner Sweet not joining us this morning?
So I don't know that he will be here. Commissioner Sweet has resigned as the chair of CFTLC. Therefore, I believe that also resigns him as the chair of FTLAC, since those two are linked together. So at this point, I will step in as chair until elections are handled at the AOC conference next week. So if he does come today, we'll clarify as to whether, he thought he was running this meeting, but it was my expectation that he would not likely be in attendance.
Copy that. I understand he has a lot on his plate.
He does. Every county has our challenges to face, and right now Coos has a lot of things that require his leadership and attention, and so he needed to step back from this commitment, which I completely understand and respect. So appreciate him spending his year with us to help us transition in leadership. Well, there's Margaret. Commissioner Tucker, you're welcome.
Thank you. Miss Margaret, looking forward to the bar next week.
Well, are you going to be there, Commissioner Tucker?
I've made one every year I've been a commissioner, and even attended the one on the year before I was a commissioner. But yes, I intend to be there.
I wasn't worried about the event at the bar.
Oh, yes, I'll be in the bar.
Do we have an open tab for Lynn County?
I think we can arrange one. I'll see if I can get Cal's credit card. Is that okay, Cal? Can we open one on ODF? All right, thanks.
On that note, let's start the meeting before he changes his mind or before we let him get a word in edgewise. So like I said, I was expecting Brandon. I don't see him, but in the interest of time, because there's a lot to cover today, I will go ahead and start this meeting at 10:03 a.m. Good morning, everyone. We've got a lot of folks with us today. For anyone, oh, there's Brandon. Who is not familiar, I'm Erin Scar. I was the vice chair. As I shared just a moment ago, John Sweet has stepped down as chair, which per our bylaws elevates me to chair until a new leader is chosen at the conference next week. So I will be chairing this meeting today. So I just want to welcome everyone. We have a lot of folks with us today, which is great. We're going to, do some good work today, I think. I would like to do just a quick round of introductions because we do have quite a number of folks with us who are not always with us on this meeting. So if we could start with our FTLAC board members, if you could just introduce yourself. And as I said, I've already gone, so I'm going to pass it to you, Commissioner Tucker.
Will Tucker, Lynn County Commissioner, representing Lynn, Benton, Lincoln, Marion, and Polk counties.
Thank you. Commissioner Magruder?
Margaret Magruder, Columbia County Commissioner, representing Columbia, Washington, and Clackamas counties.
Thank you. Commissioner Bangs?
Commissioner Bangs, Clatsop County.
Thank you. We have a variety of other commissioners with us today. I see Commissioner Scholl.
Yes, good morning from Clackamas County.
Thank you for being with us. And I think that I saw Commissioner Miller, if he's still with us.
I am. Good morning, everyone. Coming to you from Lincoln County.
Perfect, thank you. And I see Commissioner Olson.
Yes, sorry. Good morning. Yes, I'm here as a voting member when it comes to that. Thank you.
Perfect, thank you. Did I miss any commissioners in our list in getting introductions done? Okay, not hearing any. I'm going to hand it actually over to Mike Wilson. Would you like to have your staff introduce themselves?
Absolutely. Good morning, everyone. I'm Mike Wilson. I'm the State Forest Division Chief, and I will pass it off to Justin Buttress.
Morning, Justin Buttress, Policy Analyst in the State Forest Division. We'll pass it off to Todd.
Morning, everybody. I'm Todd Heron. I'm the Information Unit Manager for State Forest. I don't see who's next here.
Mike, did you want everyone from Forestry or just presenters this morning?
Did you want everyone, Commissioner?
I would love to have everyone. It's always nice to know who's in the room with us.
Okay, how about Jeff Peck? I see him on my list here.
Good morning, everyone. ODF Forest Grove District Marketing Unit Forester Jeff Peck.
Does that cover ODF staff this morning?
No, that looks like there's lots.
We got
Go
Dan.
ahead and pick another one down the line here. We'll go to Mike Cafferetta.
Hey, good morning. Mike Cafferetta, Forest Grove District Forester. Thanks for letting us listen in.
And Dan.
Morning all, Dan Goody, Astoria District Forester.
And Jody.
Jody Kern, Planning Specialist.
Brad.
Good morning, everyone. Brad Catton, Astoria District Operations Coordinator.
Chet.
Good morning, everybody. Chet Beeling, Assistant District Forester for Western Lane District.
And I see we have someone from North Cascade District.
Good morning, all. Kyle Cobb, Sanium Unit Forester.
Okay, and Crystal.
Bader, Executive Support.
Okay, I don't think I'm seeing anyone else at the moment.
Okay, I think we have a couple other folks that are with us today. I see Melissa Cribbins.
Yes, sorry, trying to get off mute. Good morning.
Good morning, and you're representing the governor's office this morning, is that correct?
I am.
Okay,
just
perfect.
happy to listen in. Thanks.
Thank you. Happy to have you. I think I saw Dawn Bone in here. Dawn, are you with us? Dawn Bone?
That's Clatsop County's county manager.
Perfect, thank you. So we've got a lot of folks. Did I miss anyone? I think Laura Wilkinson is here as well from Hampton. Good morning, Laura.
Hi, good morning. Just sitting in.
Thank you. Did I miss anyone? There is a long list and we've bounced around a lot, but again, it's nice to know who's with us today.
Mike. Hi, I'm Scott Killops. I'm with the 350 PDX.
Okay, thank you.
Good morning. I'm Michael Lang with Wild Salmon Center.
All right, thank you.
I'm Cal Mokomoto, State Forester.
Cal, the man who needs no introduction. Thank you very much.
Commissioner Scar, this is Brandon with the Association of Oregon Counties and the Council of Forest Trustland Counties.
Perfect, thank you. And I see Mike Buffo has popped up on my screen.
Yep, Mike Buffo, Director of Technical Services with Mason Bruce and Gerard.
Thank you. Okay.
Commissioner,
Yes.
Tony Whitler with Marion County Board of Commissioners. I'm sitting in for Commissioner Cameron.
Perfect, thank you. Anyone else that we missed that would like to introduce
Madam Chair, this is Margaret. I saw Dilo on there. Is he still on? John DiLorenzo.
Hi there. I'm just listening.
Wonderful. Thank you for joining us, John. And I have someone on an iPhone who just came on camera. Oh, went off camera. Okay, well, thank you everyone for going through that. I just appreciate knowing who's in the room. This is for us, a pretty full house, and we're happy to have everybody with us. With introductions complete, is there any public comment this morning? Not hearing any comment, not seeing any hands raised. We will move on to comments from the Board of Forestry Chair or State Forester. And I think we have Cal with us today. I don't see any Board of Forestry members. So Cal, do you have comments to kick us off this morning?
Not too much. I do want to extend my thanks to John Sweet. I've known John Sweet for quite a while, and I just think that his leadership and encouragement and his ability to work with all sides, I think, is just amazing. I haven't talked to him for a while. I've been kind of busy, so I think I need to Coos Bay to go find him, have a cup of coffee if possible. But Aaron, it's good to see you. We see each other more and more, it seems like. Salmonberry and so on and so forth, and very happy to see you. Of course, the department right now is pretty much embroiled in budget process with the governor's office, and we don't know how that's going to turn out. There's some issues, and that we're very curious to see how things are going. So the GRB, the governor's requested budget, will come out in December, early December. I think it's December 1st, actually. And so that'll give us kind of an indication where the governor is placing the emphasis in the program. Of course, as we all know, once the budget comes out, then the legislature takes over, and we work towards the legislated budget. And that's Brandon's going, yep, that's where the work starts. So we'll be looking at that. We are challenged right now with cash flow because of the fires. And I know people, we have cash. We got 47 million in the e-board, last e-board. We're trying to work our way to the e-board in December, and hopefully we'll get another infusion of cash so we can pay our vendors and keep things afloat here at ODF. So a lot of our managed leadership attention's on that and how we deal with it. But I am happy to see that Mike Wilson and his team is moving forward with the FMP. Right, today we're going to be hearing about alternatives and socioeconomic reports and et cetera, and preparation of the special board meeting in a couple of weeks, I believe. So I appreciate everybody's participation in this, and look forward to hearing the presentation by my team.
All right, thank you. Appreciate your comments. Okay, with that, I think we're ready to hand it over, Mike, to you and your team for the presentation. And I'll just cue up front. Do you want questions during the presentation, or do you like to get through the presentation and then we'll do questions at the end? I know sometimes our interactions can make it difficult to get to the end of a presentation. So which would you prefer?
Thank you. I mean, either way is fine. I think today's presentation is fairly straightforward. So I think it's fine if folks ask questions as we're on the scenarios, if there are particular questions about them.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Well, I will hand it over to you.
All right. Well, thank you, Chair Scar and FTLAC members and commissioners. Again, for the record, my name is Mike Wilson, and I serve as the State Forest Division Chief. So we're here today to talk about scenarios for the FMP. You've been engaged in this process in a discussion so far about performance measures, and then also in framing up, providing input for us to frame up these modeling scenarios with the board last September. So if we can move on to the next slide. So what we have done some work framing those up, and so we're going to review the purpose, why we're here today, go over the modeling scenarios, discuss the types of outcomes that will come out of the modeling next spring, and then basically move on from that. We'll have a description of what the board meeting probably looks like as well. Okay. So we're here, the whole purpose of this exercise is to explore a range of management approaches with a new FMP under the HCP, evaluate the trade-offs among key modeled outcomes, and facilitate the board and stakeholder discussion around those outcomes. And so there will be another engagement point between the Board of Forestry and FTLAC once we've done the modeling to talk about those trade-offs. So I think it's important to clarify, the board is not electing at the end of the day, not deciding on a specific scenario. We'll talk about the trade-offs and they will provide guidance. Now, it may look very similar to any given scenario, but there may also be key differences as well. And what we want to be able to do is translate that back into the performance measures, whether they are used as targets or whether they are used as desired trends. And that will help inform how we develop an implementation plan moving forward. Okay, and on that note, yeah, there we go. So for the FMP and HCP timeline at the top here, we are in that middle box of FMP scenarios. Once those are approved by the board next Friday, we will be moving forward, doing all that modeling work. And then, sometime in the spring, we expect to have the modeled outcomes associated with the modeling. And then hopefully in June or maybe a little bit thereafter, we'll have an FMP adopted with performance measure targets. Now, a word on that FMP adoption, it will be like post-dated and would not become effective until the implementation plan for that FMP is in place and we can roll out AOPs. Right now, we're hoping to do that for fiscal year 2028. So on the next timeline down, we are doing, it's not really central to this work that we're talking about today, but we are doing a revision to extend our current implementation plans so that we can continue to put out annual operations plans for fiscal year 26 and 27. And so the State Forester will be approving those early next year. So at the bottom timeline, we see the new implementation plan development starts almost as soon as the interim is this extension of the current IP is approved, and we'll be going through the process. This is a process we always go through with IPs, scoping and developing the IP process itself, because there's generally changes from one IP to another, other things to address, and so forth. And then we'll be moving into the analysis and drafts of that IP. And then we'll hopefully have that new State Forester approved IP out there in late 2026 in time for us to really begin modeling putting together new annual operations plans that would become effective in 2028. So the whole new FMP IP AOP package would become effective July 1st, 2027, if all goes to plan. Okay, next slide. Oh, okay, sorry. I'm going to turn it over to Todd now, and he can go through some of the model review and talk about the model scenarios themselves.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. Yeah, so just a quick review of the model itself. As noted at the bottom, we're still using the model. It's the same model, generally the same inputs that were used for the December 2023 modeling. That includes the spatial data, the growth and yield, and other components. And so, as a general reminder or overview, this is we call it the forest activity model. It's guided by a set of goals and rules, and attempts to optimize, if you will, management across the landscape within the confines of those, optimize the achievement of those goals across the landscape. And so it starts with the basic input data, like I said, the spatial data, the growth and yield, which represents the silviculture and the expected responses to management, and the constraints on the landscape, such as operationally limited areas, forest practices, rule constraints, and so forth. The second bullet is where we set goals for the model to achieve. This is primarily the discussion of the scenarios that we're having here with this exercise with the board. It's how we guide the model towards achieving those specific outcomes for those scenarios. The model is spatially explicit, so it tries to implement management activities at the stand level, similar to how we would implement on the ground, hopefully, as close to operationally as feasible as possible. And then finally, after all of those runs are completed, we generate reports of the expected outcomes that for the various components that we're interested in reviewing from the model. Let's see. Yep, and I think that's it for this slide. Let's see. Advance mine here. So as a reminder, we had a conversation. You all had a conversation with the board back in September, where we tried to tease out some of the scoping around these scenarios and some of the key points of agreement. In particular, there was agreement around the HCP, so all of the scenarios would honor the draft HCP commitments. Other goals and points of agreement included forest restoration, so achieving the work within the HCAs on the hardwood stands and Swiss needle cast, etc., as well as being responsive to climate change adaptation, habitat for wildlife, recreation, and revenue generation. And then in particular, some key differences that we wanted to explore centered primarily around timber harvest volume goals, flow associated with harvest over time, and then in particular the effective rotation ages. And so for all the scenarios, we're assuming that the draft HCP is in effect, and there's a consistent set of HCA management, so the restoration work and the thinning treatments that get applied, the expectations there are consistent across all the scenarios. We're also honoring Forest Practices Act, easements, and other legal requirements. And for each scenario, the logging prices and management costs are consistent.
It looks like Commissioner Banks has a question.
Sure.
Good morning. Thank you. So when you're talking about the prescriptions within the HCA areas, I am curious. So the original public version of the HCP has HCA prescriptions of light, moderate, and heavy thinning options. So outside of the habitat acreage commitments, are there any commitments on how many acres will fall into each category?
Within the light, moderate, and heavy thinning prescriptions, I'm not aware of anything in the HCP, Mike, and it's not specified within the model.
No, there are only acreages for Swiss needle cast treatment, alder treatment, and those are 500 acres a year average each, and can flex between the two. And then there's 1,500 acres per year on average of treatments that are really more correctly, I think, characterized as variable density treatments. So these will be some pretty creative silviculture. There will be gap creation, which will be small, 5-acre openings, say, and then also a variety of light, heavy, moderate type of thinning activities. So for the modeling purposes, we basically have to, kind of estimate what that would look like at a very, very, very high level, because those prescriptions are going to be very nuanced at the local level. And so until we actually get to laying those out and learn more about them, we really won't know until that point.
I mean, so I guess, can I have a follow-up, Commissioner Scar? Okay, so I guess what I'm getting at is, models from last Christmas showed that we were extremely close to the mandated habitat commitment. And so I was just curious, as once we've achieved that mandated habitat area, how much volume can actually be achieved by targeting the remaining stands within the confines of what you wrote in the HCP. So the board agreed upon that, Federal Service agreed upon that. And so anything additional constrictions beyond the mandated habitat areas, I feel like would be self-imposed penalties that the department is putting on themselves. So I was just curious if there was a way within these modeling scenarios that you could say, okay, we've achieved the mandated habitat commitments, and now we can look at our approved plan by the board of light, moderate, and heavy, and say to ourselves, how can we maximize the volume within the HCAs without adding any extra constraints to ourselves? So I was just wondering if that's possible within the models.
It will be possible in the model to say when we achieve a certain amount of habitat in general in the HCAs, or even in, outside of the HCAs, as that'll flex over time. But I think more central to your question is that's an adaptive management question under the HCP in terms of what will actually be allowed. And so as we move forward in time and we're monitoring habitat development and growth, we'll probably be going back and addressing, what else do we want to do here, both inside and outside of HCAs, just under the HCP in general, as we learn more.
And last follow-up, and I'll let them fly. Are there any changes to the assumed premise of the 30 million board feet in your data that you'll be running coming out of the HCAs?
So our desire with this modeling is, previously in the modeling, we tried to get the model to do this within a certain set of rules, and it's been problematic, both with, we've never really achieved what we feel like is the full outputs or the full amount of habitat treatments within the HCAs under any of the modeling that we've done. So we're looking to, I guess, and Todd can correct me, but I guess for lack of a better term, hardwire those treatments to assure that they're going to be done in the model. And that will give us a much better idea of outcomes from those treatments than we've had before, and also keep them consistent among scenarios. So the only real variability in what we see among these scenarios that we'll be discussing is what's happening outside of HCAs and RCAs.
So when we discuss the 185 scenario, what you're telling me is the 185 scenario is not inclusive of the prescriptions within the HCAs. You're primarily focusing on a 185 outside, because that doesn't make sense.
No, what I'm saying is that we will have there will be a certain amount that's coming out of the HCAs. We will hardwire those treatments, and that volume contributing to that 185 is what it is. And then it's the rest of the solution is the model doing what it does best. But in order to make sure that we achieve that within the HCAs, we're going to need to actually make sure that the model goes and targets things. Because we've just had some trouble with the model doing that under previous rules.
Okay, because when the board passed this HCP, they passed it with the assumption that they would be receiving 30 million board feet off of the habitat conservation areas. And so if we're saying that that prescription could change and that prescription could be actually a much lower number, then we're going to be stealing from our future selves in order to make up for the 185.
Yeah, I don't necessarily anticipate the volume piece will be, outcome from those treatments will necessarily be different. But we'll see when we run that.
Thank you, Courtney.
Yeah. Advance to the next slide. Okay, so this slide is is a summary of what we're proposing to model the range of scenarios, and we can go into more detail for each of the scenarios on the subsequent slides. But in general, excuse me, I think these are the most informative or meaningful model runs. In particular, the runs in green are the runs that we think will be most informative to the conversation. And so we're proposing to prioritize the runs in green, the 4 scenarios, and then a couple alternatives. And the reason for the prioritization, excuse me, is one, time. So it takes a certain amount of time to run each of these scenarios, and we have a limited amount of time between now and when we need to prepare for the spring board meeting. And so so that's one aspect. And the other aspect is some of the scenarios may be more or less informative. So as we run prioritize the scenarios in green, we may find that we need additional information, if you will. And so the other alternative runs are set up to help inform some of that conversation. So in particular, scenario 1, these are what we're calling, this was, the proposal from the count that we received from the counties. It's a specific volume target from Board of Forestry lands. So as we noted previously, this includes volume from HCA management as well as from the general landscape. Common school land would be in addition to this, so it would be set up as it would be set up to maximize harvest on those common school lands outside, in addition to the specific Board of Forestry volume target. And this target would run for 30 years. And then after that 30 years, the model would be allowed to reset, if you will. And beyond the 30 years, it would be set up to run as a non-declining harvest flow. So presumably at some harvest level, there needs to be a sort of reset. And we want to explore what that reset would look like to then achieve a non-declining flow after that. Scenario 2 is about looking at the effect of longer rotations with thinning in particular, to see how, what effect that has on landscape condition as well as harvest outcomes if we were to try to achieve a balanced age class across the range of ages up to that target age. And again, 150 years we felt was the most meaningful for the conversation. However, if it's going to be overly constraining or not informative, we'll try to implement the 120-year limit as well.
So Todd, I had a quick question on that. Are we going to be getting these coming out by district?
Yes, for all of these, we'll have a district. We'll be able to report harvest and revenue by district and other outcomes by district. And
an interesting conversation out in the forest with our folks. Most of Tillamook doesn't have trees that are, it's going to be really hard to get that 150 years at this point where everything is, barely reaching, what is it, 60, 70, 80 years now. So just wanted to make sure that was going to be reflected in a way that it didn't get lost in a large lump number that makes it look okay across the board, but maybe doesn't take into account the Tillamook problem that we talk about all the time. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks. And we can talk about the specific reports on a subsequent slide, but yes, we'll be able to represent the affected district or county level. And I should note on scenario 1, we did talk about implementing a district level even flow, if you will. So if you can imagine targeting a specific harvest objective across the plan area as more or less a strict level. Within that, there may need to be some fluctuation at the district level, but we're going to try to maintain an even flow at that district scale.
Mr. Banks, you have a follow-up?
I do on the even flow comment. So are you going to be looking to model your even flow from a baseline, or are you looking to model the even flow from the previous 5 years?
It would be from a new baseline. So
a new baseline. Okay, so I'm just going to use my fingers here. So we have a baseline. And if we model an even flow from a baseline, it goes doot, 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 doot down the baseline. But if we model an even flow from the previous 5 years, what'll happen is it'll go here, and then it could go here, and then it could go here again, and here again, and here again, or obviously the exact opposite direction. And so I'm just curious if we're going to maintain a baseline in that even flow model and just kind of ping pong back and forth along it.
It's an interesting question. I think the way we've contemplated it is setting it up so that within that 30 years, it's an even flow within that 30 years. If that's different at a specific district from the previous 5 years, I guess that remains to be seen.
I think we didn't quite understand each other, but that's okay. I think I'm just wanting to make sure that the even flow modeling scenario is set at a baseline, and that the even flow fluctuates along that baseline, however many percent that you have allowable, and that it doesn't reset every 5 years as your models have every 5-year increments, that it doesn't reset every 5 years as that new setting being the new baseline. Or the new.
I think I understand. I think it's yeah. So at each time period, the even flow looks back at the previous 5 years and evaluates whether or not it's plus or minus the limit relative to the previous 5 years.
Okay.
And I think the answer is yes. It sounds like from a like a long-term average across that 30 years, it would be allowed to fluctuate
above or below a baseline.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Scenario 3 is about maximizing volume. This would be, akin to maximizing for CMAI or the biological maximum. The primary run A would look at just what's the effect of just kind of an unbounded maximum volume scenario, and then if we have time, imposing a 10% periodic variation on that to address concerns around periodic fluctuations while trying to achieve that maximum volume. And then scenario 4 is similar, except in this case, trying to maximize for net present value. So that's the sum of discounted cash flows using a 4% discount rate. And so the primary run would be allowing for an unlimited periodic variation, so high levels of harvest and potentially low levels of harvest in order to achieve that maximum net present value objective. And then as we have time, look at the effect of constraining that that flow, if you will, at a periodic scale. think that's it for this slide. So now we can dig in a little bit on the specific scenarios. Just some more detail. Like we said, this is scenario 1 is about achieving a stable level of harvest for the 30-year period while we implement the HCA treatments as proposed. And then again, allowing for the model to reset harvest levels and then achieve a non-declining harvest flow for the remainder.
Commissioner Banks?
So we've talked about the 30 million board feet coming out of the HCAs, and how that is going to be part of the 185 or part of the 195 or part of the 205. So I'm just curious why our current AOPs don't reflect anywhere near that 30 million board feet.
We're essentially working towards actually testing some of those prescriptions. So we do have some operations in HCAs. We do not have draft HCAs. We don't have we're not going full tilt at that yet because there's a little bit of a learning curve, and also that clock hasn't really started yet in terms of HCP requirements. Another piece of that is there is a lot of habitat in HCAs and a lot of survey requirements. So we have to, kind of thread the needle between our current still take avoidance approach and having all of our surveys, and then also figuring out the nuances of all the different prescriptions that we're talking about applying. So we're just not, if you imagine it ramping up to speed to get there by the time we implement the HCP. That's what we're doing.
Could I follow up, Commissioners?
I don't want to go too far down the road of what the current AOPs are as we're looking at the modeling scenarios, which I think what your question was probing into, if I understood it. Okay.
No.
Okay, if it's a follow-up related to the model, please do.
Yes, so I'm just curious then, why, because you mentioned that there's a learning curve, the clock hasn't started yet. So then why aren't we, if the clock hasn't started yet, we don't actually have an HCP, we don't have any of the promises, why aren't we actually just harvesting in the HCAs? Why are we stealing from ourselves in our future years? We're this 185 number, the more years that we continue to push forward and we're stealing from ourselves in our future years.
So we have been in a position during these HCP negotiations and the draft HCP to try and be as compliant as possible with future. There's always a learning curve there for sure. And that's why we're there. Now, the longer the process goes on, quite honestly, we're going to run out of opportunities outside of HCAs. And yeah, I mean, even if it goes forward, even without a final HCP, we'll be implementing more and more of these prescriptions for sure in future AOPs. And then if it goes out long enough, well, there's also some other choices that have to be made of doing operations in draft HCAs that would not necessarily be compliant with the HCP strategies as well. Yeah, for sure.
But next slide. Okay, so just to recap, scenario 2 is about what it would take to balance age classes and achieve a longer older age rotation across the landscape. In particular, this scenario would look at what it would take to essentially expedite the balancing of those age classes. So as Commissioner Scar noted, there are some imbalances in terms of ages across the landscape, Tillamook and otherwise. And so what would harvest, what sort of harvest patterns would need to occur to fill those buckets, if you will? So we'll be using 20-year age class bins to capture the meaningful key forest development stages And let's see. And then I think it's important to note that this isn't about restricting harvest to a certain age. We would need to, the model will need to harvest a mix of older and younger stands along the way in order to effectively fill out and balance those age classes for the long term. So we're going to start with the 150 year age limit or age target, if you will, and then as time or need allows, implement a 120 year target.
Mr. Banks?
So, as previously has been mentioned in other prior meetings, modeling has always struggled with longer rotations. Were you able to solve those issues? And if so, like, were you able to solve that longer rotation and the model not recognizing like actuals, if that makes sense?
Yeah, I can touch on a couple things. We haven't made any changes to the yield projections. So that was noted as older stands were noted as we have a limited amount of information about those older stands to draw from. The silviculture that's implemented may not be exactly what we would implement for those longer age rotation scenarios. One other key point, so we had the long rotation scenario back in last December. That was heavily constrained by the even flow objective. So we had a very strict even flow objective on that model. And this would relax that constraint, entirely up front anyway. And so it would allow the model to explore the management necessary to achieve those longer ages.
I guess scientifically speaking, I should re-ask this question. How confident will you be in the 150-year rotation model scenario outcomes, in them matching what would actually be occurring on the landscape?
Certainly older stands we have less confidence in, but I think it will be, would be representative of what it would take to achieve that balanced age class distribution.
So you're going 100% confident, 50% confident, 25% confident. Like I would love a confidence level of like the information you're going to give us is 100%. I am confident that this is what is going to be there in 150 years.
I mean,
so that's what I'm looking for.
Yeah. Certainly can't give you 100% confidence in what it's going to look like in 150 years. But one thing that we do have a pretty good handle on, I think, is the age distribution of our current forests. And so we know, what it will take in terms of acres harvested by age class in order to achieve that balanced age class.
But I
The
think,
actual harvest thought. Sorry, go ahead.
I think one of the pieces would be, as you are providing these reports, when we get to that space, is that caveat that says the model performs very well in years 0 through whatever that we feel really confident, but a caveat that says once the model passes 100 years or whatever it is, the certainty of its of its accuracy does drop. I think about weather. I'll use the weather forecast as a great example. I read one this morning from the weather folks who were saying they have high confidence that we're going to have very cold temperatures and some rain. They have low confidence that the atmospheric river will actually land in Tillamook, next, because that's not until Thursday or something. Similarly, I think what Commissioner Banks is asking is some sort of a certainty, scale that just says, this is where the model performs well. This is where we're not so certain the model has as much accuracy. So does that capture what you were after, Commissioner Banks?
100%. It's why there are many of us in the room. I really appreciate that. Thank you. Yes. And after you're able to respond, I would have a follow-up question in this process.
Yeah, thanks for that clarification. I mean, this is something that we've, I guess, struggled to do here, right? Is express that confidence in those outer years. But I think there's probably some ways we can, some things we can do to help describe the confidence in those to some degree.
And then just my follow-up question is, in this process with this scenario, will you be modeling carbon sequestering?
Yes, one of the reporting components will be carbon in the forest, so trees and above ground primarily, as well as carbon sequestered in the harvested wood products. So we'll be tracking that.
And will you be utilizing Oregon State's most recent study regarding age class and premium carbon sequestration when discussing like the harvest levels? I think it was 70 to 80 years, or was it 60 years that Oregon State said that, you know, this is the threshold where we achieve the most sequestration of carbon?
I would say we won't be guided by that study, but I believe our methods would be similar in terms of the carbon accounting, and so we'll be able to, anyone would be able to compare and contrast. Next slide, I guess. Okay, so scenario 3, like I said, was about maximizing volume over the long term. And so this, if you have some understanding about the growth of forests, there's what's called a culmination age, culmination of mean annual increment. And that's theoretically, that's the point at which, if you harvest consistently at that point, you would maximize the harvest volume over time. And so given that we have this imbalance of age classes across the forest, it's going to take some amount of some time, some flexibility, if you will, in order to schedule out the harvesting across the landscape to achieve that maximum volume. And so this run is about exploring what it would take to get to that. And like I said, the first run would be unconstrained in terms of the periodic fluctuations, so allowing the model to achieve that maximum volume as soon as possible, and then as time allows, impose a 10% periodic constraint on that harvest flow.
Commissioner Banks?
So I'm curious, this is not the even flow theory. This is maximizing as much as possible up front.
Not so much up front as allowing the model to maximize volume over the long term. So right now we have an imbalance of age classes that may be, a portion of them are beyond the culmination age or haven't achieved that just yet. And so it allows the model to balance that out over time. So
maximize even flow.
It would be an even flow after a regulated condition was achieved, but we don't have a regulated forest at the moment. So in the intervening years, it would not be restricted to even flow.
Okay, so like at the beginning, you wouldn't be restricted to even flow, and you would be maximizing harvest, and then you'd reach a point of where you would have even flow, but that even flow would then be much lower than the even flow talked about in scenario 1. So I guess when you're running that scenario, I would like a reflection from the Department of Forestry on how that actually would look for you actually being able to do that with staffing levels and with operators, like the amount of operators we have on the forest floor. And then also the fact that we've had 7 mills close. And so we would literally be shoving wood through mills and potentially run the risk of minimizing the amount of fiscal reward, I guess you could say, from the process. So are we going to be making note of those different concerns in this scenario, or are we just gonna full out maximize and then find a much lower even flow and then, call it good?
So this wouldn't necessarily maximize volume up front. This would maximize volume over time. And so we won't know until we see the flow what that looks like coming out of that. But if we were to harvest everything we had now, we would end up with a much lower, that's more of a net present value scenario, harvesting more upfront. We'll get to that in a moment, but this would have greater fluctuations period to period. I would imagine in the early stages until we get to that regulated condition that Todd's talking about, and if it achieves a regulated condition within the time frame of the modeling. So we'll be able to characterize that, and we would understand, how much volume we're talking about, and also the size of what we're talking about trying to process through existing infrastructure.
Okay, so it's kind of like half net present value and half even flow. I'm really trying to understand this one. I'm sorry.
Yeah, this is a little bit of a tricky one. But essentially we're looking to say, okay, what is the greatest volume outcome over time that we could achieve? Keeping in mind a net present value would actually lower total volume over time, right? Because you're gonna harvest those stands before their biological culmination. So I would say it is similar to what we do now without the even flow constraint that we encounter. So there was a request during the board meeting, from a couple of folks about, business as usual. This isn't really business as usual. We decided to loosen that up a little bit, let the model find it without the periodic constraints, because the business as usual answer with a tight, even flow, even though it may be a little tighter than we like, is really answered by the December modeling, right? I mean, that was a strict even flow sort of thing. This is a little bit different, gives the model a little more flexibility on how to arrange that flow over time to maximize the volume overall.
Okay, and just real quick, before Mr. Buffo has a moment, what does the department consider biological culmination? What age class?
Well, that varies by site, of course. But generally we find it somewhere in the neighborhood of 70 to 90 years. With the thinning prescriptions that we typically apply and with our current management.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, Mike, go ahead.
Thanks, Commissioner. I was curious for this scenario and really for all scenarios, will ODF provide an analysis of how well these scenarios achieve greatest permanent value, or what is that reporting? I know there's a later slide about the list of details that you'll provide, but how will you connect that to greatest permanent value?
I think the outcomes from any of this modeling, basically that's what the trade-offs discussion is, right? And so it's all just a factor in the discussion that the board has around greatest permanent value and where they land on that finding.
Okay, next slide. Okay, so the final set of scenarios or scenario and all variations on that is about maximizing net present value. So this is effectively maximizing as it's described there, the sum of discounted cash flows. So this takes into account the time value of money and assumes a discount rate of 4%, and accounts for harvest costs and long prices into the future, summed or discounted and summed to present day value. So this is let's see how to describe this. So a couple assumptions in this, as it said, the 4% discount rate, not imposing a minimum harvest age, so allowing the model to find that financially optimal rotation age. So this is not the same as a biological rotation age. It's focused on the rate of return, and then allowing for unlimited periodic variation. So the expectation is that the model would harvest a lot up front to maximize that near-term revenue, and then over time would settle in on a financially optimal harvest age distribution, if you will. And then and then as we have time, knowing that that early harvest will be pretty aggressive under that scenario, what's the effect of imposing a 10% or 30% periodic constraint on that annual harvest or periodic harvest?
Commissioner Bay?
So is this the one then that it is unconstrained and harvesting more upfront?
Correct. Yeah, this should be harvesting a lot more upfront.
Is it like harvesting everything next year upfront, or is it, more controlled than that?
It's a little bit more controlled than that. One thing I didn't mention here on this slide is that at least in preliminary evaluations of this, the FPA green up rule, so the 4-year green up requirement, as well as the HCP spotted owl dispersal habitat requirements are a limiting factor. So they can only harvest so aggressively in those first years in order to achieve both of those rules.
So I guess what I'm going to request from this particular scenario is that you babysit it so that it's actually realistic, and not, just running it because you were told to run it. Because I could see that this model would take 5 years and harvest everything. And that's not what anybody's asking. And so I guess I'm just asking for the department to babysit this particular model, actually all of them, so that it's actually feasible. Whatever you're modeling and sharing with the board and sharing with us, have it to be actually we could actually do this. Or if we can't, then that it comes with all of these sidebars of we don't have enough staffing. There are not enough operators. We don't have capabilities to do this. So here's this model. We ran it for you. Thank you so much for running these things. I just want to put a voice of appreciation on it. But I also want that realistic sidebar of the model being run. Great. Is it feasible? And what would it look like on the landscape for these communities and for the department itself? I think that's what I'm searching for, because unconstrained net present value really feels like you're going to harvest everything in 5 years. And none of us are asking for that. I don't think. I mean, I could be wrong, but I know I'm not asking for harvest everything in the next 5 years. So thank you.
This run, there was a comment at the board meeting to see what the uncollared net present value scenario was. I think those were the words. And so this is responsive to that request. I think to your point, recognizing that there are real operational limitations I think in when we come back in the spring, we'll have some opportunity to discuss some of those limitations for sure.
And I don't want to speak for a board member if this is a board member request. I definitely don't want to put thoughts out there that weren't part of the conversation, but I do recognize that the realistic world of constraints, we don't have enough operators to harvest everything in 5 years. And so that's why I'm asking for possibly a little bit more babysitting on this particular model, and maybe circling back with the board member who requested it. Maybe this is that harvest everything in 5 years is what they requested, and great. I fully support the department and this board member in getting the information that they wish to receive. But I do believe that if we are modeling things, and if somebody asked a question, that it's not just, blanket modeling something, maybe, dig a little deeper and use real world constraints that we do have currently on the landscape, like number of operators, number of mills, so on and so forth. But I definitely do not want to speak for the board member whom requested this. Thank you.
Okay, I think we can go to the next slide. So with all of those scenarios, there will be, reporting from each of those scenarios, and we anticipate having the same body of reports, set of reports for each scenario, so that they can be compared side by side, and to really inform that trade-offs discussion. So specifically, these reported outcomes are not necessarily performance measures, right? They may be aligned with performance measures, but they're not specifically the performance measures. So things like harvest volume in acres by stand age and method, thinning versus clear cut, HCA treatments and those restoration treatments, both inside and outside of the HCAs. Will be reporting on those. Revenue distributions to the counties, net present value for all the scenarios. Again, we'll use that same 4% discount rate for reporting the net present value. Forest conditions. So this is things like age class distribution, frequency of large trees, habitat conditions, both inside and outside of the HCAs. Any specific HCP commitments we'll report on. So in particular, or of interest in this modeling, will be the spotted owl dispersal requirement, but we'll also report on the habitat associated with the other species. And then, as noted, the carbon storage and flux associated with both in-forest carbon as well as harvested wood products. And then finally, all of this modeling work will be handing off to Eco Northwest to do a more detailed socioeconomic assessment of the outcomes. So that'll include things like direct and indirect economic benefits from both timber harvesting as well as non-timber forest uses. More information, more detailed analysis of the government revenues, and then impacts to recreation users.
Commissioner Banks?
Will all of these models be for 30 years only, or will they be for the full 70 so that we can see the departure level after year 30?
Yeah, so we can report it for 30 years as well as 70 years. The model runs for 150 years. I'm not sure if we'll be reporting for 150 years, but we can focus in on the 30-year, 70-year time frame for reporting.
Thank you so much.
And then out of our conversation today, I think there's a desire in these reports to also have that level of confidence as
Mhm.
well as the reality check that says, is this even, is this possible? What are the constraints?
Yeah.
What are the challenges in this that would impact it? So I think if we can make sure those are also a part of the reporting, that would be great.
Yeah, we can try to incorporate that. Yeah, the notion of confidence on these models, I think we're going to be hard pressed to put like some confidence bounds on it. Like, but I think we can work to describe our level of confidence in those projections.
It'd be a high, medium, low, a high, medium, it doesn't
Something
have to be,
like that.
we're not expecting you to say this one's 100%, this one's 23%, but give us a sense of high, medium, low. So we have something to evaluate it against, because all of this is great. And then it's the analysis that comes with it in this trade-off conversation. And we want to make sure we have all of the information we need so that we can say, okay, gosh, at the first blush, it looks like that 150 rotation is fantastic. But let's remember, we have a medium confidence in this, so that we're just all on the same page. Because if I'm sitting with low confidence in that model and Courtney is sitting with high confidence in the model, how we have our conversation is going to be very different than if we have a shared confidence level in the model and the knowledge for that. Commissioner Bennis.
And I just want to reiterate that confidence level is super important also for me and our other CFTLC members, because we've been blood, sweat, and tears with the governor's office using the 185, using that number. And, to this day, I actually have pretty low confidence that that's achievable, because I'm not seeing action outside in the AOPs that would support the claims of that 30 million board feet in the HCAs. And so I'm just really in tune to how confident are you in what you're going to be presenting, and a little bit of transparency for the board and for us. So that, again, to Commissioner Scar's point, it allows us to have conversations with each other, the governor's office and the board, that all say, well, yeah, this is actually low confidence, so we should just push that aside potentially. And then I do want to reiterate the statement that I made previously. I recognize that you have board members that are requesting certain things, and I fully support those requests, and I don't want to interfere in the premise behind those requests. All I'm wanting is, again, what Commissioner Scar stated is, okay, here's your request. How feasible is it? Here is your information. These are our concerns, so that we can have that confidence, that conversation moving forward. I think we're all a little PTSD from the HCP stuff. And so that's why I'm so interested in the information that we're receiving being above board, because I still wish we could have that 225 million board feet. I'm just putting it out there. Sorry. Thank you.
Thanks. So with that, yeah, I think I'm done here. I'll pass it back to Mike.
All right, thanks, Todd. Just kind of teeing up what we're really going to be asking of the board next week is, and here's the current recommendation as it's reflected in the staff report, and basically saying we recommend they tell us to go run these scenarios. And the ones in green are the primaries. And then what we're really looking for, I think, is discretion around that, depending on how those runs go, as to whether we need to run B and C in the grays. But I anticipate there will be some discussion among the board, and they will, maybe want to see one of these implemented regardless. And so we'll work with that. So we'll be, live adjusting, those scenario 2, 3, and 4 as we go, to meet that. Scenario 1, I don't anticipate any changes at all to those. Those are your scenarios, and we intend to run them as is, just as shown. So definite on the green, and some wiggle room on the gray, and maybe just telling us as staff that we have discretion to do some of the work in the gray if we feel like it's necessary without coming back for additional approval. But I do think it's important that we actually have this decision from the board to say, yes, go do this body of work, so that we're just all clear from the beginning for what we're looking for. So the next steps after
Mike, can I
that.
ask a question on that real quick?
Yes.
So I know that we've been able to have Mike Buffo in conversations with you all leading up to this work. Will we be able to still have Mike Buffo in those conversations as you all are running the models? So that if there is something that he sees that he feels like, to your point of having the flexibility to adjust, if you see something and think we should actually have a tweak this way or that way based on what's coming up so far, are we able to have Mike's voice at the table on behalf of FTLAC during that process?
Absolutely, yeah.
Thank you. I think that will help. I think, just knowing that there's someone there who's also thinking about it through our lens while you all are doing that work. So I appreciate and support the adaptive nature of what you're talking about, having a little tweaking ability. Commissioner Banks.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to reiterate my focus on the prescriptions within the HCAs moving forward. If there's potential to reflect a little deeper on the depth of prescription, whether it's light, moderate, or heavy, and the acreage, and so on and so forth. Because I am going to Pollyanna this. That 205 would sure help. Especially since we have not been able to settle upon a solid legislative winner to help all of our pies moving forward. Because we spoke often about none of us can afford to lose. So so thank you. I just want to put out there that I'm hopeful that by utilizing the HCP to its maximum potential, using the prescriptions that were approved by services that we can, or that were approved by the board and then supported by the services not yet approved. We don't actually have an HCP in hand, but you know what I mean. So thank you so much.
Absolutely. So as we go forward, if we get board approval, we will start modeling these scenarios, and that'll take the better part of the winter, and then we'll get together in the spring of 2025 again, FTLAC and the board, to talk about the trade-offs. Not exactly, a lot of this depends on the pace of the modeling and all generating the reports and all of the other things. I don't anticipate it would be before April, before we'd be getting back together with the board, and maybe more realistically May. Either way, I think we'll end up having a special board meeting about just this at the time. And then the board setting performance measures based on the scenarios to guide development of those initial implementation plans.
Commissioner Banks, go ahead.
I'm sorry, you're going to get tired of saying my name. I apologize. Do we have any projection of when we're going to have an HCP in hand from federal services? I just, with legislative session, and now you're saying May, that's not going to help us this legislative session to know what our future is going to be. So I'm just kind of I'm just curious if we have a projection.
So we do not have a finalized timeline. What we have done is we have submitted the pencil, I'll just qualify this, of course, with the HCP, nothing's final till it's final, right? We have submitted what we call our pencils down draft to the services for them to begin their, and they have to some degree started work, but for them to continue and actually formally start their Section 7 consultation process their Section 10 findings, and then finalize NEPA. We will be getting together with them soon, likely early January. What they are doing now is they are reviewing the pencils down draft again, right? Making sure they don't have any questions before they move forward. We'll be getting together, and what we're going to do is line out all our different process steps, which are mostly at this point their process steps, and trying to assign the dates to that. But I would not be surprised, and I'll just say this is my estimate. I'll qualify it that way. I wouldn't be surprised if we don't see our final HCP before the spring of 2026.
Commissioner Banks?
So with that, and with the length of time that all of these models are going to take, and with, you know, the FMP, like, is there, so this is a twofold question, because I know politically possible and actually logistically possible. Like, politically possible has a different answer than actually physically possible. But is it physically possible to harvest within the HCAs that you have set out, so that you can create a bailout for your department to fund itself and to help fund us in the interim, and also to help fund the schools that are greatly faced with a giant problem right now? So I'm just curious, like, in the conversation, is it physically possible to harvest within the HCAs? I'm not asking politically possible, I'm asking physically possible.
Physically possible, yes.
So if there was a decision along the lines that said, hey, we do need some funding, we did overcommit to our habitat, you know, owls, I'll just call that out from our December meeting, that you could cut and create funding for your department and for the counties that are currently like abundantly struggling, and for the schools that are also abundantly struggling, just to solidify that if there was a political decision made, it could be possible to fund yourselves and us for a longer period of time while we wait.
It would be physically possible to harvest timber potentially in there and create more revenue. However, I will say, I will stop short of saying funding ourselves, fully funding ourselves, because we are in a situation regardless, where our costs, management costs, outstrip, you know, our revenue generation.
And so I guess I want to ask, what is your target need revenue cost?
Well, it changes every time, you know, every year. I don't really have a firm number for you, but we'd be in the high 40 millions. You know, would be great to have that much revenue to be able to fund ourselves. You're on mute, sorry.
The 225 million board feet you could fund yourselves. That was the original goal, was for the department to fund itself with the 225 million board feet. So that's why I'm asking these questions, because the department made a choice to not harvest within the HCAs. That wasn't like, we don't have an HCP, so you you punished yourself, I guess, and us, prior to having an HCP in hand, and you overcommitted habitat. And so the question I asked, which I feel like you answered, was yes, you can harvest in the HCAs, but we're choosing not to. Not we, your department is choosing not to. And so I think that was what I was trying to get at, was that there is no HCP in hand. There won't be one until, you know, projected 2026 possibly. And so that's another, you know, year and a half, or year and I don't know how many months. I don't even know where I'm at this point, but that amount of time that you're self-inflicting and upon others, something that's not necessary. So I do appreciate your time today, and I think I will pass to Commissioner Scar. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Commissioner Banks. So I want to circle us back to the scenarios and the conversation we've had today, which is a little bit different, all absolutely connected to what Commissioner Banks was asking, to see if there are any other questions or comments related to the scenarios conversation we've had. Everyone's been pretty quiet except myself and Commissioner Banks. So I want to make sure that we are not monopolizing the airspace. If there are others who would like to have an opportunity to comment. We're a quiet bunch today. We started that way when we all logged in too. Silence was golden.
Until I came on, and so I'll continue to harass you, Commissioner Scar.
Oh,
So-
please do, Commissioner Tucker.
So I think that the six, the green, does help us bracket our understanding. And so actually seeing the output is a great help. I wish we'd seen it a year ago. And so that is I'm excited. I just wish we could see the responses sooner than later. Thanks.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Other comments? So I have a different line of questioning then that I guess I would like to go down. We commented early on in this that time was difficult in getting the scenarios done. And I do know that financially, the department is in a bit of a bind. Do we see any potential where this could get derailed based on the funding of the department and the time, just not being able to have staff have time to do it, because we are going to be struggling with paying the bills and keeping everybody employed. So is there any concern there? And I don't know if that's a question for you, Mike, or for Cal, but it's a concern.
I'll start off and let Cal pile on. So in terms of actually doing this work right here, I don't think that there's anything that will keep us from doing this particular set of work. We're pretty well supported for that. We always have our financial constraints in state forests, and we have for decades, but at the same time, yeah, we have the room to do this. We're secure in this.
Thank you. Cal, you want to add anything to that?
I think Mike's response is accurate. I am concerned long-term. And, but I don't have any solutions to present to you. And I think we've been working on ideas, and I'm going to have to look to the governor's office for direction on where we can go next, as far as trying to develop long-term solutions. But it's a concern, and it's a big concern too. So.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I think it's a concern we all share. I don't know how other counties' revenue projections have come out, but ours just dropped by $1.2 million between the last quarter's projection and this quarter's projection. So if that's happening in Tillamook County, it's also happening to the department. And so I think there is definitely a concern, and a growing concern for all of us as to how we will manage going forward. So we sit in solidarity and a shared concern today. Commissioner Banks.
And yeah, solidarity. I think that is what I would like to reiterate from previous conversations is I truly believe that the counties and the department are in this together. And when we go into legislative session, I would like to also consider that the counties and the department are in this together. And so at no point in our conversations have we ever wanted to throw the department under the bus. Granted, I might internally periodically, say, dang it, how did I get here? And have a little anger. We've seen that, but that at the end of the day, going into the next couple of years, it really would benefit, I think, both entities for us to stick together. I don't want to have either of us throwing the other under a bus. There are too many jobs at stake. There are too many, the economy at stake, especially for Clatsop County and Tillamook. And so, yeah, I just wanted to reiterate that I'm looking at this next legislative session, seeing how still to this day, and Commissioner Scar and I were in a previous meeting together, we are still trying to find a way, still. And so I hope that in the future we can open this conversation up to be more inclusive of the department too. So thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Okay, if there are no questions on the presentation we've seen, let's talk about what comes next. I know this is going before the Board of Forestry in a special meeting. I believe it's next week, if I'm not mistaken, and that is not one where FTLAC will have representation or the opportunity to comment, if I understand correctly. So I think my question is, the Board of Forestry will be officially approving you moving forward. Is that correct? And if they wish to make significant changes or pull out anything that's important to us, how is our voice included in that?
Yes, that is correct. And I will say that for the scenario 1, runs A, B, and C, the only way those change is if Mike Buffo wants to, in working with us, suggest some tweaks along the way. Those scenarios will be run. The remaining scenarios really came more from board discussion. And so those are the ones I expect that they may want to suggest that we, run some kind of, put a limiter on something or some other modifier to those scenarios 2, 3, and 4.
Thank you. We'll hold you to that, Commissioner Banks.
I did have a question. It came up over here in the chats. So the AOPs approved exactly how many million board feet in the HCAs?
I'd have to get back to you on that.
Okay, because last I checked, it wasn't even near half. It was like closer to, 15%. That was the last time I checked. So I just wanted to point out for those listening and watching, that's not anywhere near 30 million board feet. I don't even think we hit double digits. So yes, I would love to hear back about it, but when I'm 30 million board feet is a lot. And that's why I'm so tuned into it, because I want us to be realistic. And to those listening, it's not even anywhere near, I think you would call it a drop in the bucket. So thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. So is there anything else that we need to do in wrapping up this conversation about the models? Any others? This is the going once, going twice conversation related to the models, and then we can shift to the upcoming FTLAC, and we might even be able to give everybody a few minutes of their time back, which is highly unusual in these meetings. So one last run at it. Anybody, anything on the models? Okay, not hearing anything else. FTLAC upcoming meetings. Brandon, do you have anything? Your camera off, but is there anything specific to FTLAC that you want to share with us? I know what comes next for CFTLC, but talk to us about FTLAC.
Sure. So this is the last official FTLAC meeting. It's kind of a special FTLAC meeting because of the model runs here. We will hold our board elections next week at the AOC annual conference. Those board elections, whoever gets elected to the board becomes the FTLAC membership. And so we will hold our next FTLAC meeting most likely at the beginning of next year. It's usually a couple weeks before official Board of Forestry meetings. So I'll work with Mike and the department to find out when those 2025 FTLAC meetings or 2025 Board of Forestry meetings are, and we'll plan our FTLAC meetings accordingly from there.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Well, I think then we do get actually almost an entire half an hour back. Once again, unheard of for these meetings. So I just appreciate everybody's participation today. I appreciate everyone joining us. This was a great crowd. I think that The models will be very illuminating for all of us. We look forward to what we will learn from them. And yeah, so with that, if there's nothing else, I see in the chat, Commissioner Scholl has asked Brandon to please send the slides, if he could, to all commissioners that were in attendance, or perhaps all commissioners that are part of the Trust Lane counties would be
Yep.
great.
Happy to.
Perfect. We'll make sure that happens. Okay. Well, with that, then I am happy to give everyone 25 minutes back by adjourning us today at 11:34 a.m. Thank you all.
Thank you.
You.
Thank you.